There is a jar sitting in a garden shed not 10 miles from here, filled with something so ordinary that the man who owns it almost threw the recipe away twice, and inside that jar is the reason his roses bloomed clean through August, while every other rose bush on his road turned black with aphids and had to be cut back to stumps. He did not spend a dime at the garden center. He did not call anyone in a truck. He peeled a few cloves of garlic from his own kitchen counter, and by the time the neighbors figured out what he was doing, half of them were embarrassed they had been buying spray bottles for years to fight a bug that garlic sends running. My name is Earl Dawson. I keep a garden and a few rose beds of my own out here, and I have used this same trick for longer than I care to admit because it works, and because it costs next to nothing, and because nobody makes a nickel off a farmer boiling garlic on his own stove. I am going to tell you exactly how to make it, exactly how to use it on your roses so the aphids leave and stay gone, and I am going to be straight with you about what it will not do, because I have no interest in selling you a miracle. Garlic spray is not a miracle. It is a genuine, cheap, homemade defense that most rose growers have simply never been shown. Before I get into the making of it, I want to tell you why this even needs saying, because most folks who grow roses have already fought this fight and lost more than once. Aphids show up in April or May, tiny green or black specks clustered thick along the new growth and the undersides of the buds. And by the time you notice them, there are already 100 more you have not seen. They suck the sap right out of the tender stems, the buds curl, the leaves go sticky with the stuff the aphids leave behind, and then the black sooty mold moves in on top of that sticky mess, and a rose bush that was healthy in April looks half dead by June. Most people reach for a bottle at that point, a chemical spray with a skull and crossbones warning printed right on the label, and they spray it on the very flowers they meant to enjoy, and they wonder later why the bees stopped coming around. I learned the garlic trick from an old woman 2 farms over from where I grew up, a widow named Ruth who grew the finest climbing roses in the county along the whole south side of her porch, thick with blooms every single summer, and not a spray bottle in sight. She kept a coffee can by her back step, and every few days she would drop in whatever garlic scraps came off her kitchen counter, the papery skins, the woody ends, a clove gone soft in the drawer, and once a week she would fill that can with water and let it sit in the sun. Nobody taught her that in a book. Her mother taught her, and her mother before that, and by the time I was old enough to ask why her roses never had a single aphid on them, she just handed me a jar of the stuff and told me to go find out for myself. I was maybe 14 the first summer I tried it on my own, and I did it wrong twice before I got it right. The first batch I made, I threw whole unpeeled cloves into cold water and let them sit for an hour, then sprayed it on my mother's rose bed expecting the aphids to drop dead on the spot. Nothing happened. Not one bug moved. I went back to Ruth's porch feeling a little foolish, and she laughed at me, not unkindly, and told me I had made garlic water, not garlic spray, and there was a world of difference between the two. She showed me the chopping, the full night of steeping, the straining, the soap. The second summer I did it her way, and by July my mother's roses were the only ones on the road that still had clean new growth on them, while the neighbors' bushes 2 doors down were curling up black with aphids and sooty mold. That was the summer I understood that a thing does not fail because it does not work. Sometimes it fails because you have not yet been shown the whole of it. It helps to understand, too, why roses draw aphids so hard in the first place, more than most anything else in the yard. Roses push out soft, fast new growth all spring, tender stems and tight young buds loaded with sugary sap, and that is exactly the sort of easy meal an aphid is built to find. A rose bush in full spring growth is, to an aphid, about the richest table in the whole garden, softer and sweeter than the tougher, older growth on most shrubs and trees nearby. That is not bad luck. That is simply what a rose is built to do every spring, and it is why rose growers fight this particular battle harder than almost anyone else with a garden. Let me tell you plainly what this spray does and does not do. Because I have seen enough videos online making promises no plant spray on earth could keep, and I refuse to be one more voice adding to that pile. Garlic spray does not poison aphids the way a chemical insecticide does. It does not sit in a bottle killing on contact the moment it touches a bug. What it does is simpler and, in its own way, more useful. The sulfur compounds in garlic, the very thing that makes it sting your eyes when you chop it, are the same thing that aphids cannot stand the smell of. A rosebush coated in that scent is a rosebush the aphids fly right past on their way to somewhere less unpleasant. It is not a poison. It is a warning sign written in a language only bugs can read, and most of them heed it. I've compiled all these traditional methods into a manual. The link is in the description. There is real science under this, not just an old woman's habit passed down without reason. Garlic is loaded with sulfur compounds, allicin being the main one, released the moment you crush or chop a clove. Those compounds are what give onions and garlic their sharp bite, and they are also mildly toxic to soft-bodied insects and can interfere with how aphids find a plant by smell in the first place. Aphids do not hunt with their eyes the way a bird does. They drift on the wind and land, and then they decide whether to stay based largely on scent and taste. A leaf that smells wrong to them gets abandoned fast, before they ever settle in to feed and breed. That is the whole secret. You are not fighting a war after the fact. You are convincing the aphid never to move in. Now, the making of it, and I will tell you it takes about as much effort as making a pot of soup. Take a whole head of garlic, 10 to 12 cloves, and peel them, then chop or crush them fine, because the finer you break them up, the more of that sulfur oil gets released into the water. Drop the crushed garlic into a quart of water and let it sit overnight, a full 12 hours or so, covered, sitting on the counter. That steeping time matters. Rush it and you get a weak, watery spray that smells faintly of garlic and does almost nothing. Give it the full night and you get a concentrate strong enough to make your own eyes water when you strain it the next morning. Come morning, strain out the garlic bits through a cloth or a fine strainer, because any solid chunks left behind will clog your spray bottle within the first few pumps and leave you fighting the sprayer instead of the aphids. What you are left with is a strong garlic concentrate, sharp enough that a spoonful of it would clear a room. This is not what you spray straight onto your roses. Mix that concentrate into a full gallon of water, and while you are at it, add a teaspoon of plain liquid dish soap, the mild kind with no added scent or bleach. The soap is not there for the smell. It is there so the spray actually sticks to the leaf, instead of beating up and rolling right off, like water off a duck's back. Without the soap, you are mostly watering your rose bush and getting very little garlic where it needs to go. Some folks like to add a little cayenne pepper into the mix as well, a teaspoon or so stirred in along with the soap, and I will tell you honestly that I do this myself most seasons. It is not required. The garlic alone does real work on its own, but the capsaicin in the cayenne adds a second layer of discomfort for soft-bodied pests, and between the two, aphids, spider mites, and even the soft young beetles that like to chew on new rose leaves tend to steer well clear of a bush treated this way. If you have small children or pets who like to nose around the garden, leave the cayenne out and stick with the garlic and soap alone. It will still do the job. When it comes to spraying, timing matters more than most people think. Spray in the early morning or the evening, never in the hot middle of the day, because a fine, oily mist sitting on a leaf under direct sun can scorch the tissue, and you would be trading an aphid problem for a burn problem, which is no trade at all. Coat the new growth heavily, since that is where aphids cluster thickest, the tender tips and the undersides of the buds where they hide from the birds. Turn the leaves over and spray underneath as well as on top, because the bulk of an aphid colony lives on the underside, where the leaf itself shields them from rain and from view. A spray that only hits the top of the leaf misses most of the actual bugs. Here is the part where I have to be honest about the limits of this, because I would rather you know it going in than feel let down later. Garlic spray is not going to erase an aphid colony that has already exploded to the point where the stems are black with them and the leaves are curling up like burnt paper. At that stage, you are dealing with hundreds or thousands of insects, and a spray that discourages new arrivals will not instantly clear out an entrenched population overnight. For a heavy existing infestation, you still want to knock the bulk of them off first with a hard blast from the hose, physically dislodging as many as you can, and then follow up with the garlic spray to keep new ones from moving back in, and to discourage the survivors from staying put. Garlic spray shines brightest as prevention and as a follow-up guard, not as a rescue mission for a rose bush already lost to the bugs. It also washes off in the rain, same as anything else you spray on a plant, so a heavy storm means you go back out and spray again once the leaves have dried. Through the height of aphid season, late spring into early summer, I spray about once a week as routine, and after any rain heavy enough to soak the leaves, I add an extra pass whenever I can. It is not a set-it-and-forget-it fix. It asks a little regular attention, the same way any rose bed does if you want it thriving rather than merely surviving. A word on keeping the spray itself, because folks often make more than they need for one evening and wonder what to do with the rest. Once it is mixed with the water and the soap, it holds up in a sealed jar in the refrigerator for about a week to 10 days before the smell fades and the strength goes with it. So I generally mix a full gallon at a time and use it across 2 or 3 sessions rather than making a fresh batch every single time. Keep it labeled clearly if it is sitting in the same refrigerator as your food, because a mason jar of cloudy garlic water looks a good deal like something a hungry man might mistake for soup stock, and I say that from experience I would rather not repeat. Set it somewhere dark and out of direct light between uses, and give it a good shake before you pour it into the sprayer, since the oils tend to separate and rise a little if it sits. I will mention one more trick that pairs well with the spray, though it is a slower one and asks a little patience. Garlic bulbs planted directly in the soil around the base of a rose bush, 3 or 4 cloves pushed into the dirt a few inches out from the stem, release a steady, low dose of that same sulfur scent up through the root zone the whole season long, working underneath while the spray works up top. It will not replace the spray on its own. The scent from the soil is too faint to do the job by itself, but planted together the two reinforce one another, and I have kept a ring of garlic growing around my best rose bushes for years now for exactly that reason. Come midsummer, you can pull a few of those bulbs for the kitchen besides, so nothing about the planting goes to waste. Before you spray a whole bed at once, especially the first time on a rose variety you have not treated this way before, it is worth testing on a single leaf or two and waiting a full day to see how the plant takes it. Most roses handle this spray without any trouble at all, but leaves vary, and a young, tender variety fresh out of a nursery pot can sometimes show a little sensitivity that an older, well-established bush would never notice. A day's wait costs you nothing and saves you from finding scorched leaves across a whole bed you have been tending for years. One caution I will give you plainly, because I have watched folks skip past it and regret it. Garlic spray does not know the difference between an aphid and a beneficial bug any better than it knows the difference between a weed and a rose. Ladybugs, lacewings, and the little parasitic wasps that naturally hunt aphids can be put off by a heavy dose of this spray, same as the pests are, and bees working in open bloom do not care for the smell any more than an aphid does. So keep the spray off the open flowers themselves and aim it at the leaves, the stems, and the buds before they open. Spraying in the early morning or evening also helps here, since bees are least active in those hours, and the ladybugs already patrolling your roses get less exposure. You are trying to run off the pests, not clear the whole garden of every insect that visits it, and a little care in where you aim the bottle keeps the good bugs working right alongside you. There is another honest bonus worth mentioning, though I will not oversell it. The same sulfur compounds that discourage aphids have a mild effect against certain fungal issues too, things like powdery mildew and black spot that plague roses in humid weather. It is commonly said among old rose growers that a regular garlic spray keeps a bed noticeably cleaner through a wet summer, and in my own beds I have found that to be true more often than not, though I will put it to you as a likely side benefit rather than a guaranteed cure, because I have no interest in promising you more than the spray has ever delivered for me. I want to say a plain word about why this is not already common knowledge, because it is worth understanding and it is no dark conspiracy. Walk into any garden center in the spring and you will find a whole aisle of bottles promising to save your roses, systemic insecticides, foliar sprays, granules you work into the soil, and every one of them costs real money and most of them ask you to buy again next season. There is a business built on that aisle, trucks that deliver the stock, salesmen who train the staff on what to recommend, glossy labels designed to catch your eye on the shelf. There is no business built on a head of garlic from your own kitchen. Nobody drives out to your house to remind you that the same bulb sitting in your pantry for cooking supper could also be doing guard duty on your rose bed for free. It is not hidden, it has just never been anybody's job to tell you. So here is what I would have you do. Pick a head of garlic off your kitchen counter this week, the same as you would for a pot of soup, and make up a batch the way I told you. Steep it overnight, strain it, mix it with a gallon of water and a teaspoon of dish soap, add the cayenne if you are so inclined, and spray your rose bushes early some morning before the sun climbs too high, getting the undersides of the leaves along with the tops. Do it again the following week and keep at it through the season, and watch what happens to the aphids that used to show up every spring like clockwork. Tell me down in the comments whether you have ever used garlic or any other kitchen scrap to fight pests in your garden, and how it worked out for you, because I would like to know what other old tricks are still being used out there that folks like me have not stumbled onto yet. If your own family kept some homemade remedy for the roses or the vegetable bed, something passed down the way Ruth passed hers to me, share it below, because those small pieces of knowledge are worth more than any bottle on a shelf, and they deserve to be kept alive. Next time, I want to walk you through building a proper compost tea, a spray brewed from good finished compost that does for the whole health of a plant what this garlic spray does for keeping the pests away, feeding the roots and building up the soil life so a rose bush gets strong enough that it barely needs defending in the first place. Garlic spray guards the gate, compost tea builds the fortress behind it, and once you have both going in the same garden, you will wonder why you ever reached for a store-bought bottle at all. For now, remember that most of what troubles a garden has a quiet answer sitting closer than you think, sometimes no farther than your own kitchen counter. Ruth never spent $1 keeping her roses clean, and neither have I, and there is no reason you should have to either.